People have heard about Molokai, the way of reading, or something like that. Molokai is a Hawaiian name, and it means something, Molokai. We began hearing the name of the place called Molokai around the 1800s. Yeah, it's such an amazing book. Yeah, the genre of the book would be tragedy because from the very beginning to the end, for those who, when they watch movies, cry or read about sorrowful events, you cry and cry and cry. The first day I read it or started reading it, it was just a long day of tears rolling down my eyes. So let's just give a brief rundown of Molokai. Apart from its Hawaiian meaning and all that, it's an island within the Honolulu, Oahu, Hawaii, and all those kind of places. Those who have been to Hawaii would understand. They have lots of islands. Yes, and those islands make up a state. Anyone who has heard of Molokai knows what situation to relate Molokai to. Molokai can be linked to a disease called Hansen's disease. That's like a soft, beautiful name of that disease, which everyone knows as leprosy. We've heard about lepers, even in the Bible, that Jesus healed and all those things. So in the 1800s, when leprosy or Hansen's disease became a major problem in those islands, the states developed a kind of plan of sourcing out those people who have been infected by the disease, and they will be sent to a treatment center. Once they ascertain you have any kind of skin, whatever, you'll stay there for a while, they watch it, and if it continues to spread and doesn't heal or receive treatment, those people officially are going to be taken to Molokai. There, the government gives them accommodation, provides food to an extent. So it's a beautiful place. When they get there, they begin a new life. They can plant other crops to supplement the food ration that the government offers them, and also a small monetary aspect that they go to shopping with. All in all, that place seemed like a land of banishment. Trust people. Even while people were still in the normal setting there in Honolulu, you catch the disease, you're treated already as if you're dead. Your church, your workplace, your school, everybody abandons you. The neighborhood, they run away. So that's what happened in this beautiful book that I want to talk about, Molokai, written by Alan Brennert. The author says he felt really enchanted by that whole area, and said he would write a story about that area. And then he already knew, and most people know already, that many authors or writers have written something about Molokai, but all of those writers dwelt more on the life of a priest called Damien, Father Damien, whose bishop sent to the island of Molokai to minister to the abandoned or banished people, so to speak. He spent almost 20 years on that island, preaching, celebrating Mass, visiting people, praying for them when they die, burying them, and that kind of thing. He would eventually get or catch leprosy after 16 years on the island of Molokai. But he wasn't afraid when he was first sent there. He said he wanted to be a presence to those people so they don't feel forgotten or left out of life in general. So he went. And after some years, some Franciscan sisters would join him, and one notable woman would be Marianne Cope. You know, the Franciscans have lots of groups that bear that term. So Marianne Cope was the founder of one branch of the Franciscans who went to Molokai with her sisters. None of the sisters ever caught leprosy, but they're always in contact with people, you know. So Alan Brennett, the author of Molokai, let me show you a copy of the book. This is what the book looks like. Molokai, Alan Brennett. So this writer wanted to write differently from other people who had ever written anything about Molokai. So he didn't dwell on the life of Damien, but decided to create his own characters out of what he had found through research and combing through government resources and available information related to leprosy or Hansen's disease on that whole area, you know. Yeah. So he wanted people to get to know the characters or how people fared on the island by talking about specific stories, most of them true, some fictional, but on the whole, people suffered a lot due to Hansen's disease or leprosy. Even in this part of the world, Africa or Nigeria, I have visited a lepers colony somewhere in Edo State, Nigeria, but it's no longer functioning. They have a normal hospital there now, yeah. Leprosy is a very terrible disease that affects the nerves, tends to eat up the skin and create different kinds of contortions, and sometimes it eats up the flesh that people no longer have fingers. The fingers are repressed, even the toenails, every part, the bones become deformed, even the cartilages and even faces become deformed, the nose. I don't know. It's like, it's, what do we call it now? A skin eater. That's a human skin eater. You know, they have different forms of leprosy. But let's not go into the whole leprosy thing. I'm just trying to give us an overview of what this whole thing is about. So the story on this in this book that I'm reviewing, titled Molokai, begins in a family. Let's see what some other reviewers have said about the book. And the book is one of Target's book club books that are used by readers. Target is a big shop in the US, but they have a section for books, and this book won their attention. So some people are saying that Molokai is a big, generous, compassionate, beautifully rendered epic novel. Yes, it's an epic novel about a largely forgotten, ignored chapter in Hawaiian and American history. Hawaiian American history related to Hansen's disease or leprosy. The writer has exquisitely textured tale of darkness and light. I would add, yeah, they've added it. Tragedy. And, me, I want to add resilience of the human spirit, not necessarily triumph. Because before people triumph, they face that period of resiliency. Resiliency would mean a situation where people undergoing serious human issues are able to endure to the point that someone else that is not happening to will wonder how they got that willpower to stay sustained. And some of them are original characters, like I mentioned. The novel is actually absorbing. You won't put it down until you're done with it. And I've been able to read it in like 5 days. The story actually haunts because it talks about the dead. People die every day on the island of Moloka'i. You know, story of death, a tragedy. Yes, and I had said in my own, I put something on Facebook. It's actually a moving story. It doesn't stop moving. The history is so long, almost all through the 1800s. It's engrossing. Someone else says it's a story of survival. If this were a movie, we would find that many people would die in it. So the story begins with the life of a young girl called Rachel from about when she was 5 or 6 years old. Grew up in a wonderful, loving, close-knit family. Her father was a stevedore on ships, with islands and waters, oceans all over Hawaii and all that. That is one area that many people specialize in. So her dad was a stevedore, always in ships, traveling around the world. And yeah, her father's name was Henry, her mom's name Dorothy. She had another sister, Sarah, and two brothers. Her mom was so close to her. One of her brothers' name was Kimo, and the other one Ben. So it's a story about the family of Mr. Henry Kalama, his wife Dorothy Kalama, their first daughter about 10 years from the beginning, Sarah Kalama, their first son Kimo Kalama, and Ben Kalama, a Hawaiian family living in Honolulu. And so her dad would go on long trips for months, about 8 or thereabouts. And whenever he comes back, he would purchase dolls for her. So she had a collection of beautiful dolls, and her dad had this special likeness for her. And that's something parents need to watch. Sometimes our parents pour so much affection on some of our children. Not that they hate the other children, but I guess because she's the last child. So not knowing that her sister was jealous of all those attention, even though she was older, she would later confess towards the end of the novel. And then all of a sudden, the little girl contracted leprosy. The leprosy did not actually begin with her. It began from her uncle, Pono, her dad's elder brother. He would come to the house, they would eat together, play, laugh, and I guess he got it and eventually transmitted it to the girl, and somehow later one of her brothers will catch it. But by then, Rachel had gone to Moloka'i, the island where leprous people were treated and taken care of by the government. But more or less, they were just off normal society, just getting to be by themselves and suffering from Hansen's disease. So when she caught it and her mom got to know about it, they called everybody together in the family, prayed in a traditional way, And then her grandfather was saying because eventually that her dad dreamt she was supposed to be named Ali, but the dad did not share that with the mom because he felt because the mom goes to church, she would not like that kind of traditional thing. So they said it's because her name wasn't given, the Ali traditional name, blah blah blah. After all the prayer, everybody confessed in the family if anyone has hurt against each other. And the mom went to a herbalist who gave her something they put on the welt or the wound like thing on her thigh. It went away. After some time, it came back again, and then the mom realized this was leprosy. She was so afraid. Then she started wearing the girl's shoes, long dresses, so no one would see it. And she discussed with the children not to ever talk about it to anyone, much less say their sister has it. Everyone agreed. Only for the little girl to spoil her sister's straw hat. And one of the days they were in school talking about it, quarreling, fighting, and then the elder sister mistakenly or whatever calls her a leper. And when that happens, they have a health board they had then who goes around schools examining children. And the man had examined that girl in school one of the days, but it was her hand and just her face he looked at and didn't notice anything. But he had picked up a young boy and taken the child away. It is the health board that takes people like that away from their families. There's nothing you can do about it. Eventually, when Sarah, Rachel's elder sister, calls her a leper in school, that changes the whole story. The guy who normally comes to pick up children as his job and government pays him to bring leprous people so they can take them away from the community so they don't, you know, make other people catch it. Eventually goes to her family house, picks up the girl, and they take her to a small holding somewhere just to watch her for a few months, or max 1 year. She was crying, crying bitterly then. Her dad was inconsolable, but he was managing to hold himself. The mom was practically not herself. Her sister was filled with grief for mistakenly revealing it. But eventually, even if her sister did not reveal it, it would have been found out because other people were found out too. And the dad promised she was going to come back home eventually. Her situation wasn't receiving treatment. Her uncle first was the one who went to Moloka'i, and then she was eventually sent to Moloka'i. She lived on that island. She went to the island when she was 7 years old. She left the island at 62. So imagine spending 50 years away from family. Somehow her dad visited her twice. She was writing to her mom, who eventually left the dad because of so many things. She felt her daughter contracted Hansen's disease or leprosy from his elder brother, and that disintegrated their marriage. She went her way with the other three children. He went his way, but he would visit the girl 3 times. The woman, eventually, she got married, on the island, even gave birth to a daughter whom she named Ruth after a reverend sister, or sister, not reverend sister, Catherine, whom she became friendly with. And Catherine had said her first name was Ruth, so she named her daughter that name. So her dad was no longer in touch with the other people, and when he comes, he would tell her stories about what the brothers were doing, which were not true, but he just wanted her to feel happy and all that. So she was on the island living her life. They had a home for boys and girls because they didn't want children living in the larger Molokai community due to abuse and all that kind of thing. You know, Her uncle would have taken care of her, but they said he was already sick and wouldn't be able to. So she went to a place called Bishop's Home for Girls. We had another home for boys or young people underaged. There she was for many years until she was about 2 months shy of her 18th birthday. She eventually had to go take care of Haliola, her uncle Pono's girlfriend on the island. Her uncle died, was buried, and then, you know, they had to let her go since the lady needed to be taken care of, and that's where she was, living her life, doing things with the lady, and just learning life and struggling with life on Molokai. She would eventually meet different men, three, and then finally she met Kenji, whom she eventually married. And then she got pregnant. You can't keep a child on the island because the child, even just after a few days, could contract Hansen's disease or leprosy. So she decided to deliver at home so she could have a little time, even just for the night with her baby, before they had to take her to the government. And government would normally ask if you want the child to be sent to families off Molokai or the child should be adopted. Her dad was very, very old, even though he had said he would take care of the child, but she knew it wasn't possible. They asked the man, her husband's family, they refused. Japanese people see Hansen's disease or leprosy as a curse, and if any of their family members eventually contracts it, it's a taboo for them to deal with you. Yeah, so they hated their son who contracted leprosy, and so they didn't want to take the child. So the child was eventually given up to the government, and she went to live in a government home for children on the island, not on Molokai, where her parents were. So at 5, she was adopted by another Japanese family too, and eventually they would leave and went to live in California. And her daughter there, Ruth, got married and went to live in San Jose. So somehow her husband got a job on the island as a manager of the big store. She would go to help him or go to work at the home. After some time, many of her friends, the young girl she met at Bishop's home, would eventually die. She became the very last of the set of children, young girls, to die, you know, because her husband, the government started doing a program whereby they'll be running tests on you to see if your case is getting better. And if that happens after about 6 tests, you can be set free to go on parole, leave Molokai and go outside to the world, wherever, but come for checkups from time to time. Practically, that's like you are healed or the disease is no longer functioning in your system. Her husband was the first person to get that. And the doctor also revealed that she was still positive. But the husband refused to tell her and told the doctor never to tell her that he was good to go on parole because he didn't want to leave her alone on the island. And that was left at that. So they eventually got a neighbor, a very terrible man who drinks like something else, got a girlfriend, would beat her, beat her, beat her. All they would do is to call the police. But one of the days it was terrible. Her husband got angry and ran out of the house to see how they could go save the lady, Felicia, the guy's name who was the beater, Crossan. They barged into the house and just held Crossan hostage. The lady ran away. Crossan got offended, hit the man, and somehow pushed him, and his face hit the door jamb. And he was very sickly then, so he gave up before the doctor could come. It was very terrible for Rachel, you know. And then the guy was taken away. At the end of the day, wasn't even sent to prison, but to remain on the island at a place for older men and all that. Rachel was angry after the whole court proceedings and all that. He was sentenced to about 35 years, but still to live on the island, with some of this stuff with people. He was a white guy though, but even though he was white and got leprosy, he came over to Molokai. You know, you know that Hawaii is annexed to America, so they were doing things together then. He didn't want to stay in another state that had those facilities because he didn't want his family members to know. So Kenji died. Rachel continued with her life. She buried him the Buddhist way, continued with her friends on the island, and one after the other, her friends died and she became lonely. But thank God, Sister Catherine was still there. They kept up their relationship and all that. At some point, Rachel was released on parole when her 6 tests or examinations proved negative, and then she decided to go back to Honolulu to look for some of her family members. She went to where they keep records first to look for her daughter. They said they had moved, but eventually Sister Catherine was able to get her a letter from one of the white sisters who lived in the home where Catherine's daughter was sent. And that way she was able to get the contact address of her adoptive parents. And then she was able to sail to San Jose, and there she met her daughter Ruth. After everything that went by between them, it was a happy moment. And then she visited for a week, returned. Before then, she had caught up with her sister, visited one of her brothers, and then they went to visit their mom's grave and the grave of the other brother, Kimo. And then her sister invited her to come live with her in another place. I've forgotten, Lahaina. That's where her sister lived with her husband who had passed on. Her children were grown and gone. So eventually, when she returned from visiting her daughter, she relocated to stay with her sister Lahaina. Because even in Honolulu, it was difficult to get a job. People were still stigmatizing lepers, even though they said they could say there were people who had suffered from Hansen's disease. Leprosy was really terrible then. We pray that nothing like that happens in our world again. So she traveled. She said she loved traveling like her dad too, who was traveling all over the world. She did some traveling. Eventually, her sister passed, so she had to move back to the island to stay with people she felt she was closer to, whom she had lived with for 50 years, and that's where she passed away. And towards the end, we see her daughter returning from San Jose with her granddaughter to be at her funeral, and she's buried. And yeah, the story is so tragic. If you're someone who cries when watching a movie, you had better prepare. Carry your tissue papers and keep it by your side. I cried, and I kept crying. Oh gosh. This tells us there's so much sorrow in our world today, and we should mind the way we deal with people and treat them. Okay? So if you're a book lover, I want to introduce Moloka'i to you. This is a must read for you. Make sure you get a copy of Moloka'i and cry your eyes out. That's a review of Moloka'i. I hope you'll love it. Get a copy and stay tuned. Ciao, ciao.